Today, ZainTECH and Nile are announcing a strategic partnership to bring a new approach to network as a service across the Middle East.
The networking industry is going through the most basic transition and revolutionary transition since the internet. Its focus is on moving faster with AI to become more secure, and it builds a foundation for delivering outcomes to customers, not products that are difficult to use and legacy in terms of the orientation. It will be redefining how network is consumed, not just as a service, but in terms of autonomous and the ability to really bring intelligence from the very beginning to architecture, which you can't do as a bolt-on architecture. It will be service-based models, and it will be delivered through strategic partners such as ZainTECH, where we protect our customers from having to do forklift upgrades, new generations, new capital expenditures.
Enterprise networking has become too complex. For years, organizations have had to buy, deploy, manage, secure, and continuously upgrade their own infrastructure. Nile's approach is to simplify networking by delivering it as the most secure service autonomously. Customers consume networking based on the outcomes, with security built in from day one rather than having bolted on later on.
We, in conjunction with ZainTECH, will deliver commercially and technical business outcomes. We provide a consumption-based, so you pay for what you use, you don't pay for what you buy. We also provide performance-backed SLA guarantees at 99.95%. Nile, in conjunction with ZainTECH, are going to bring the world's most secure network delivered as a service to this region.
We chose Nile because their approach rethinks networking from the ground up. Security is built in, operations is simplified, and the model aligns with what customers need today. Speed, flexibility, visibility, and resilience. Combined with ZainTECH's regional presence, customer trust, and deep understanding of cloud, cybersecurity, managed services, and AI-led transformation, this partnership gives enterprises across the Middle East a strong path forward, modernizing their infrastructure.
The future of networking is intelligent, autonomous, and delivered as a service. Together, ZainTECH and Nile are helping enterprises build the infrastructure for what's next, delivering a wired and wireless network as a service that combines hardware, autonomous operations, and built-in zero-trust security. One simple AI-powered solution with 99.95% availability and a financially backed service guarantee.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, can you hear me? Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, Nidhi. You're quite clear.
Perfect. Great. Thank you all once again for joining today's webinar brought to you by ZainTECH and Nile. Today, we're going to explore how organizations are simplifying security, strengthening security operations, reducing the cost and complexity of modern networking, and most importantly, how this industry of networking is being transformed globally, right? Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mohammed Yahya, the head of our technical team at ZainTECH. Over to you, Yahya.
Thank you, Nidhi, and good morning, everybody. I want to start today by thanking you for joining us today and realizing the fact that every organization in this room is being asked to do something extraordinary right now. Move to AI, make decisions in real time, open new digital channels, do it faster than competitors, and do it without breaking anything. And almost everyone is being asked to do that on top of a network that is designed for a world that no longer exists. It's built for a fixed office, built for devices that you own, built on the assumptions that everything inside the building could be trusted. The ambition has moved, the foundation underneath it hasn't yet. In all my customer conversations, we still go back to that the network is still fragile. And if you build anything on top of a fragile network or a fragility. I'm Mohammed Yahya, lead the technical solution consulting team in ZainTECH across the region, and I spent majority of my week in exactly these conversations with different customers, may it be banks, hospitals, hotels, manufacturers, or ministries. And it all comes back to the requirement for a resilient network that is matching the current modern age. And that's why we are excited to share our partnership with Nile and bring in the best-in-class network as a service that drives and secure and provided as a service from both ZainTECH and Nile. And before I go into the details of this with Dipin from Nile, I want to spend just a couple of minutes to give you an introduction and overview about ZainTECH capabilities. Now, if we move to the next slide, of course, ZainTECH is the digital solutions arm of Zain Group, right? On a daily basis, we deal with millions of end customers, hundreds of enterprises. So when it comes to a network conversation, right, it can tell you that we have the right expertise supported by the strong compliance frameworks and regulatory posture in the region. We really know what we're talking about when it comes to the network. In a short period of time, over the past few years, we've managed to grow to become one of the leading IT solution providers in the region across 7 countries, whether it's Kuwait, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi, UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait. So for anybody running a multi-state or a multi-site infrastructure, that's one operational model for you, one commercial relationship, and the right support structure that you need all across these regions. We already have 3 security operation centers and NOCs live today in Saudi, Jordan, and the UAE, with Kuwait coming pretty much soon. All of this is supported 24/7, SLA backed with redundancy across all the different sites. So this is a clear picture in terms of what resiliency is going to look like for you. We already have the numbers behind this. We've built it for the region and we are able to deliver this at scale. We have 14 data centers across the region, across 7 countries. We deal with more than 40 technology partners to give you the best-in-class service. And we already have hundreds and thousands of customers working with us. All of this is supported by almost employees to give you the best-in-class that we have. Underneath all of that footprint, we have tier 3 and tier 4 facilities across the region in Saudi, in UAE, Oman, in Bahrain, Jordan, Iraq, and Kuwait, with all the right regulatory organizations and all the right required certifications to give you the best-in-class services that we can offer and redundancy in the region. All that enables us as Zain to be able to help you transform your current strategy and business outcomes into everything that is digital, intelligent, and resilient. Digital, starting from process automation to next-gen experiences. Intelligent, of course, is helping you understand how ready you are to AI, creating advanced analytics to Gen and agentic AI. And of course, you can't build AI on an infrastructure that you can trust. And that's why we have a very strong go-to-market when it comes to our resiliency. We make sure that your operations are secure, available, and adaptable. And this is the piece that we're going to dig deep into today with Nile, our partner. In all the conversations that come up with around networking, we continue to see 4 big challenges that come here. One is around operation. How much of your team is spending their days on tickets, on configuration, on actually brilliant engineers taking time away from their work and adding no value, just trying to keep their network up. Security, and of course, everybody has security at the perimeter, but nobody has it inside the LAN. Of course, capital that comes every refresh cycle and takes away from the current issues that you want to fund, and of course, lastly, around the skills. So with that, I want to hand it over to Dipin from Nile, and Vipul, if you can run the poll again, so the team can, the audience can as well provide their input, and we can drive more into the details in terms of the offerings that we are bringing into the region with NaaS.
Certainly, yeah. Thank you so much for that introduction. And give me a second here while I share my screen, and I encourage the attendees to take the poll on the right side. How far along is your zero trust journey for the network?
Starting to see people voting. So again, it's 80% is around city gaps, 20 around day-to-day operations. Now it's moving. I think it's split between day-to-day operations, security, a little bit around the cost as well. Yeah, pretty much aligned to what we see. So I'd say 40-50% in terms of day-to-day operations, 30% in security, and the rest is around mainly the cost. Yeah, I think it's Dipen, over to you. Tell us how Nile and ZainTECH can address those challenges together in the region.
Perfect. The poll really set the stage for us to get into the next section. And thank you, Yaya, for an amazing introduction to ZainTECH. And the poll result really, it resonates with what we are about to dive into here. And before we jump into Nile and what Nile is all about, and how are we going to address some of the security concerns and the day-to-day operational concerns that your poll suggests, my name is Dipen Vardhe. I'm part of the product management group here at Nile. Been with Nile for well over 5.5 years. I'm the director for all things wireless service and day to network operations. As you might guess, I've been around the block doing enterprise networking for several years and been with several vendors in my past life doing enterprise Wi-Fi, SD-WAN, and several other technologies. So with that, it's my pleasure to be here and being talking with such a diverse crowd today. So a little bit about Nile. Nile was started by two stalwarts already well known in the industry, right? John Chambers, needless to say, he does not need any introduction, and Pankaj Patel, who was a long-time CDO at Cisco. He's the founder and CEO for Nile. Nile is present currently in 30 plus countries, and we are deployed across 12 plus verticals. Today, we hold over 70 plus patents. We are featured in 2 Gartner Magic Quadrants. We have deployments that are as large as 12 million square feet of warehouses. We have also deployed networks that have seen 200K plus users in a single location. And we have campuses that sprawl 40 plus buildings. And as you can imagine, when John Chambers and Pankaj Patel are involved in a venture like this, they are not out to build just another networking company. They are basically out to build the world's most secure network that is delivered as a service. With that mission in mind, everything that you will hear me talk today is going to be about secure first and connect later. So with that said, a little bit about the leadership that's backing this mission that we have set in motion to disrupt how networking is done, how you think about networking. So we have stalwarts like George Kurtz, whom we all know from CrowdStrike, Joe Lonsdale, who's co-founder of Palantir and companies like Adepar, and Sumant Mandal, who's the managing partner for March Capital, one of our larger investors. And with this experience is what we are enabling ourselves to think about security operations and not just how networking was done in the past. So when you're out to build something that is disrupting the networking space and making it about operations and making it about inbuilt security, you need a leadership and a board of directors that brings that diverse thinking to the table. We have been called out as visionaries in the unified wired and wireless Gartner quadrant. And we've also been placed as challengers in the infrastructure platform consumption services GMQ. And as far as the Gartner Peer Insights is concerned, which is purely based on the voice of customer that Gartner collects from Nile customers and what are customers saying about Nile, we are a 4.9 as seen in the 2025 Gartner Peer Insights. So this is a testament of what Nile is bringing to the table, and people are believing in what Nile is doing and is able to provide the value and in terms of outcome to our customer base. Speaking of which, we are not limited to just one or two verticals. We are already deployed in very different verticals, all the way from higher education to trade shows. One of the largest tech conferences that happens in the Middle East, Nile has been a proud network provider for the LEAP conference in the KSA region. We've also deployed in warehouses. We manage distributed enterprises, and so on and so forth. And to provide some real examples behind all those different verticals, these are some proud customers that are using Nile, and they are benefiting from the operational simplicity, the savings, as well as the inbuilt security that Nile brings to the table. So with that, let's jump a little bit into what Nile is about, a little more in depth. So when you think about Nile, it's all about three-tiered approach. Number one, Nile was always built to be a cloud managed service, and hence you will always get the SaaS-like agility with it. The second is the Zero Trust Fabric, the completely reimagined fabric, and we will delve into more details about that in just a minute over here, that brings data center class security to the access networks. And the third is autonomous operations. So a lot of the savings and all of the operational efficiency gain that you're going to see is because of everything that we built at Nile was thought of with autonomous operations in mind. So AI, as well as closed loop automation or agentic AI or deep instrumentation, was not thought of as something that got layered on later. It wasn't an afterthought. And that's what has led to hands-off operations model with Nile. So with that, what does the Nile service entail, right? So at the center of it all is the services cloud. In the small box that you see below, that's the Zero Trust Fabric. It consists of access switches, distribution switches, Wi-Fi access points, the gateway, and physical sensors wherever required. These physical sensors are the ones that are constantly probing the service and then uploading that telemetry to the cloud. And that's how we are able to measure the upness of the service, the availability, coverage, capacity. And that's what's enabling us to basically provide those guarantee performance SLAs. So with that said, there are add-on services available also. So when Nile started a few years ago, it started with the access service primarily. But then since we have added the Radius service, which is hosted in the cloud, which enables you to basically as a customer now think about, do I need a separate box that does Radius for me, or could I go with Nile's cloud hosted Radius service? And we will talk about how all of this comes together in providing you a more holistic solution. We also have an add-on service for DHCP. So for your end user devices, you could be running the DHCP service in the Nile's cloud. Again, helping you to potentially do away with your VM infra that's maybe running your centralized DHCP servers on some blades. We have a very innovative guest service, which essentially is inherently secure, and it's completely Nile hosted, meaning you're not having to worry about anchor controllers and DMZ location and maintaining DMZ locations. The secure guest service is completely Nile hosted through a guest point of presence, meaning your Nile services edge will create a tunnel directly to the Nile POP, and the guest traffic exits out of the Nile POP. And Nile manages the IP addressing for those guest users. And that's how we are able to help customers to not worry about copyright infringement or pirated material and so on and so forth. Then we have the trust service. This is where we have launched our micro segmentation. So as we go along in this presentation, we'll talk about how Nile's fabric is built for zero trust inherently, but the trust service is what really brings the identity and device-based trust model to the security, where you can really do fine-grained policies. And then lastly, the edge service. This is the newest service that we have launched, where Nile also now has the ability to terminate ISP links directly into the edge box. So we are able to now sit at the WAN edge as well. And on either side of this diagram, you can see the Nile autonomous operations. This is the piece that basically runs the brain of the AI ops outcomes and the closed loop automation that we'll see and talk about in the coming slides. And the Nile portal, if time permits, I'm going to show you a quick preview towards the end of this presentation. So with that, what is all of this based on? It's based on very high performance hardware that is built, tested, designed by Nile. And these are just some sample pictures of the hardware portfolio that you will see with Nile. You have the Wi-Fi access points ranging from Wi-Fi 6 to Wi-Fi 7 is coming up soon. We have the Nile gateways, and we have the Nile access and distribution switches, and we have the physical sensors. And we also have all of our Wi-Fi access points equipped with the scan radio, but it also doubles down as an inbuilt sensor. So in case a physical sensor is not able to be deployed because of deficiency of outlets or physical limitations, we are able to leverage inbuilt sensors in our gateways and inbuilt sensors within our Wi-Fi access points. All right. So with that, just to get one of the first questions that come to mind about Nile, which is, hey, Nile is a service, and what does me as a customer or a partner, what my responsibility look like, and what are the things that Nile takes care of? And as we go through the rest of the presentation, we'll peel the layers and we'll understand better what does the Nile service entail and what the experience and journey with Nile will look like. So on the left side, quickly, Nile is responsible for the architecture, design, and bill of materials. So customers and partners are not having to basically go through the painful process of deciding, do I need a certain type of architecture? Do I need to pick this switch versus that switch? And will this AP suit this environment better? Will that access point suit me better? And so on and so forth, right? Then comes the Nile Lab app, which essentially is designed for quick and easy deployment of your network. And then the AIOps command center, that is where Nile is responsible for performing software upgrades, security patches, and security upkeep that is required for the access network. And on the right side, since it's the customer's network, or if the partner is managing it, you still are in control, which means whatever is required for your environment in terms of what IP subnets to use, what segments to use, what kind of roles and micro segmentation policies do I need. I need to integrate with some third-party applications, like let's say I need SIEM integrations with ServiceNow. I need ITSM integrations with ServiceNow, SIEM integration with Splunk, and so on and so forth. You still have that control. You decide what my SSIDs would look like, what my subnetting would look like. But the core network is something that Nile helps manage. So what does all of this mean is you're able to in-source control while outsourcing operations. And we'll look into this in more detail as we go along. So as with any service, the first question that you would ask is, how is Nile able to scale? with autonomous operations. And for autonomous operations, you need to have the right foundation. So we had to make sure that we have deep instrumentation and telemetry built into each of our Nile elements that provides us X-ray visibility into the fabric. So if I were to take an example of just the switch, we collect everything from the SFP that goes into a switch to the physical port, as well as the resources that the switch is using. And on the Wi-Fi access point alone, we collect upwards of 300 plus telemetry points. The best part is it is all a unified data model, which is extremely powerful. And we'll see here in a moment, why is it that the legacy systems are not able to exploit the full potential of what AI is able to bring to the table, and Nile is able to go to the full extent of providing closed loop automation. The second is self-learning. So we have domain-specific AI models that we've put in place for network and security. So when we talk about domain-specific AI models, what we are really referring to here is these are models that understand the networking knowledge. So if there is an AI out there that is able to identify, let's say, hey, what kind of plant is this? And maybe that AI has been trained on all the different kinds of flora, fauna, and the vegetation out there, and it's able to identify different kinds of plants and so on and so forth. So now that model is able to speak your biology or your zoological language. So with Nile, we have put domain-specific AI models that actually speak the networking language. And as you can imagine, with the standardized fabric that Nile has built, the learning is even more on point, and the outcomes that you can expect from AI with Nile are a lot more deterministic in nature. So then that really leads me to the third point, which is the closed loop action. So if you think about the Nile fabric, the way it has been built, it deploys and it functions in one single way, irrespective of what vertical and what type of customer you have deployed it at. So that brings about the determinism plus the unified data model between the structure of the telemetry coming from the AP versus the switches versus the sensor. There is coherency because it's one single unified system. So with that said, here's the reason why a lot of AI that you hear about today is not realizing its full potential. We still think about AI as something that's able to discover missing VLANs on a trunk port, or it's able to detect stuck ports, or it's able to detect like several DHCP failures happening in one shot, or it's able to detect several authentication failures happening. However, we feel that's not the true potential of AI. What AI needs to do for a network is it needs to be operationally ingrained into the system. With some of the things that we'll look into here in a minute, when you eliminate the need for VLANs, when you eliminate some of those protocol stacks that are in the first place causing you issues, then what remains is really the tough problems that AI has to solve, which is the user experience issues. Why is my Wi-Fi slow? And how do you solve some of those unexpected software bugs? How do you solve for things like the quality of my software upgrade? And how do you make sure that as a service, you're leaving the network of a customer better than what it was after a software upgrade, right? So autonomous operations, they have to be built on a clean sheet of architecture, and that's what Nile has done. So moving the gear from bit of the autonomous operations going into the security gap, and this is where we have our second poll coming up. One of the Fortune 500 CISOs that we spoke to once mentioned to us that mobility security at scale has not been addressed. So even when you talk about NAC solutions and security solutions that you can piece them together, but still security at scale for access networks has not been addressed, is what some of the Fortune 500 CISOs out there think. Before we proceed further, let's take a quick poll, and we'd love to understand from our audience, how far along is your zero trust journey for the network? And of course, we're going to unravel this very slowly in terms of what does true zero trust really mean, right? So let's see if the poll is up there. We see some. We have some responses pouring in. If one of the panelists could please help me with what we are seeing out there. Is it folks think that they've not started their journey yet? Is it planned for the next 6 to 9 months? Is it in progress, largely in place across the network? How is that split looking?
I see a combination, a mix of answers depend. So there is a mix of next 6 to 9 months, in progress.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So now it's changed. Now we have the majority of a lot of organizations still exploring, and then we have a split between 6 to 9 months and in progress.
All right. So with that, let's unpack this a little more. So the security gap that we see today is, let's first look at how we got here, right? So when mobility was needed at scale, that's how controllers came into the picture. And when you needed mobility and management at scale, that's how cloud and AI ops came into the picture. When mobility and overlay security was needed, that's how bolted on NAC came into the picture. However, what never got solved was mobility and security at scale. And really, the wired and wireless security, did it ever get unified? I mean, that's questionable. And that integrated security, where you're not having to have several different layers come together in order to provide you that NAC, if you will, for your network, right? So the challenge that is presented to us is securing the LAN is a constant battle. Why? Because imagine in your network, the largest surface area of entry point is the LAN. And why is that becoming more and more vulnerable? Years ago, the whole IoT journey started, the OT journey started. So your networks were already seeing an explosion of IoT devices on the network. The human element was always there. Weak passwords, piggybacking hackers, breach points getting created because best practices were not followed. Then you have complex configurations and then errors in those configurations and so on and so forth. So some of these attack vectors was always there. IoT started exploding years ago. And guess what? And I see one of the gentlemen asking the question about, what about AI and what it can do? With AI agents, there is a statistic that for every employee or every human on the network, there could potentially be 10 different AI agent identities on the network. What does it mean for your access network to be secure? In this world of AI, where agents are going to now start pouring into your access network with their own identities, right? So that's where the next set of concepts that we're going to talk about become really important. Then we also have the legacy network problem, and we still have vulnerabilities like the air snitch. Maybe some have heard of it, maybe some have not, but there was a very popular paper that was released a few months ago called the air snitch. And we all like to blame the Wi-Fi, and Wi-Fi is what gets blamed for performance on networks. The very first blame is put on the Wi-Fi network. But guess what? When AirSnitch got released, it was not Wi-Fi for once. The paper really was talking about the underlying L2 adjacency that attackers were able to exploit. They were able to exploit the fact that I am able to get to some other device on the network because of L2 broadcast domain, or the fact that there is L2 adjacency present on the network. So if you really think about some of the change in vulnerability that we have seen in the Wi-Fi space, if you will, the tone has now changed from exploiting the protocol, because Wi-Fi has evolved. It has definitely done a lot of work to strengthen our security protocols with WPA3 and enhanced open, using higher cipher suites like 192-bit encryption and so on and so forth. But none of that matters when you have an insider that can exploit your L2 adjacency. That's what AirSnitch is all about. So net, it's an architectural problem, which is masquerading itself as a Wi-Fi issue. And here is why. LAN architectures are still stuck in the 1990s. VLANs is one of the biggest culprits. Then you have not just VLANs, but VLANs sprawling. You have several of them. Now you're managing them per port on the wired. You're managing several VLANs on potentially your Wi-Fi access points and SSIDs. You're potentially using VLAN pooling. So the problem just multiplies. When you have a larger scale, you have now multiple controllers. And the problem basically just starts to get compounded. And we already talked about the IoT and OT exploding in the surface area. The NAC as it stands today, it's really bolted on. If you think about all the complementing layers that you need to basically realize a NAC, you need the radius, you need the wireless LAN controller, you need the role-based access, then you have a separate system that's making sure that only authorized users are logging into your network boxes, and so on and so forth. So that's just on the point solutions with security bolted on. Next is the operational complexity. Everything we talked about in the first pillar, it's directly feeding into your operational complexity. What does that mean? Meaning, let's say if you have a bunch of devices that are using statically IP address devices, we have talked to customers where the IT administrators have changed over a period of time and nobody knows what's on the network anymore. If there is a device that's using static IP addresses, there is just no visibility. That's just one example. But imagine the policy spaghetti also that gets created over a period of time. Then you have fragmented management. You have an interface to manage your radius. You have an interface to manage your policies. You have an interface to manage your wired and wireless LAN. And on top of that, you have to worry about license renewals and so on and so forth. Plus, all this said, the upgrades for each of these different layers, it's still the network operations team or the security operations team's responsibility. And that's a lot to take on. And this is why breaches happen. This is why networks tend to be vulnerable. So the operational complexity eventually leads into high operational costs. So needless to say, when you just take the example of upgrading the network, you most likely are thinking about upgrading your wired network separately, your wireless network separately. You're probably spending a lot of resources just testing different combinations of software versions internally first. Will this version of software on the switch interoperate with XYZ version of a software version on the wireless? And will those two versions then eventually work with my radius server? Will it work with my other policy engine that I may have, and so on and so forth? So net, your operational costs are only rising. And all of this basically is compounded by the fact that LAN architectures have not been reimagined, right? We have always layered on a solution on top of each other whenever we have come across a problem. And that's how we are here. At Nile, we basically said the entire fabric has to be reimagined. So that's how we came up with our Zero Trust Fabric, that's completely architected on deterministic layer 3 design. There are no VLANs in the Nile architecture. Now you may ask, well, if it's a layer 3 architecture, what about some of my broadcast and multicast applications? Definitely, that's a deeper conversation. We would be happy to go into a lot more detail in more targeted conversations. But we do have multicast and applications that need broadcast also work on the networks. But fundamentally, it's a deterministic L3 design. That has now led us to basically build a lot more deterministic autonomous operations with the AIOps command center. And the fact that Nile is involved with the partner and customer from day -1 to day n, the entire journey enables you to simplify operations. The software upgrade being one of the bigger ones as far as day 2 networking is concerned. But from day -1 to day 1, we are helping you simplify your bill of material creation. We are simplifying how your architecture is going to look like, because it's going to get deployed the same way. So there is one standard way the fabric gets deployed. And eventually this is all delivered as a service, meaning it's an OpEx subscription model. You're not having to worry about renewals, and you're not having to worry about separate support contracts. It's all rolled into one. Plus, as I've heard on the street, there are vendors who are also now offering value services where customers are now spending more just to help them with understanding what are the right combinations of software versions they should use, which software version is the most stable, which software version is the least buggy, and so on and so forth. All of that goes away with Nile because we are providing you that as a service. Okay. So with that clean slate approach to the fabric itself, let's dive a little deeper into what does true zero trust really mean. So folks who are just starting their zero trust journey, or folks who are halfway there and thinking about, I need to implement zero trust for my enterprise, what does it mean? You need to think about zero trust across all the layers, meaning infrastructure, access, as well as policy. Let's dive into infrastructure first. Infrastructure meaning, if you take the Nile switch or AP, or let's just say, what does infrastructure zero trust mean? You need to have things like certificate-based image signing. There should not be any open ports. Nile switches and APs do not have any console ports as well. Basically, you just cannot get into the box at the physical layer itself, right? So that's at the infrastructure layer. The next is access. So far, we've always treated networks where you let a device or a user connect first and then we secure. But in zero trust, the principle needs to be flipped around completely. You need to secure first and then connect later. So by default, with Nile, you're essentially not letting anybody get onto the network without authentication. And the access is either identity based. And once you have access to the network, there is always a continuous authentication mechanism in place. So that's what true zero trust means at the access layer. Once you have access to the system, then we start thinking about policy. Policy is where you start defining who can access what, for how long, and so on and so forth, right? So this is where the proliferation of malware really stops. So security feature number one that's completely built in and that you already by default get with Nile is a default deny posture fabric, meaning someone connects a laptop or a desktop into a Nile switch, it is not going to get access unless someone approves it. That device is going to stay there waiting for approval. If it's wireless, of course, you will be implementing some sort of security on wireless. If it's guest, it's open, so it's a whole different story. If you are using guest with Nile, then anyways, that traffic is going to get segmented out to the POP, right? Now with policy, that is where you have full granular control. Again, today's session will not be able to go into too much depth about the trust service itself, but Inherently, the Nile fabric does not allow any peer-to-peer traffic, and which is where we have quite a few feathers in our hat where the Nile fabric was installed at hackathon events as well as hacker conferences where we had capture the flag events, and world-class hackers were not able to breach into the Nile fabric, right? So we'll look into some of those stats in a minute here. Just to zoom into a little bit on the identity-based approach itself. The first is single pane of management. That's what you get with Nile. So imagine how I was explaining earlier about you have the wired management, the wireless management, you have the radius, you have your NAC solution, then you have your policy engine. For all these different services, if you will, that are coming together, and then your access network kind of becomes complete. With Nile, you're getting a single pane of management. With the built-in security and true zero trust posture, there is zero lateral movement by default. Two devices connected into the same segment, into the same switch, or connected to the same AP by default in the Nile architecture, they won't be able to talk to each other unless you have configured a policy or your firewall lets you do that. Next is identity first, meaning we are not relying on merely just the MAC address or let's say a passphrase on the wireless. Identity first network means we are also using fingerprinting and other techniques to make sure that we are continuously authenticating the device, and if we are seeing deviation in fingerprint, then we are able to take certain actions. And then microsegmentation is where you start to have a lot more deeper fine-grained policies where you can have certain device groups, certain user groups, access only certain ports on a certain service, and so on and so forth. Again, we won't have time to dive into it deeper, but it's definitely a conversation to be had in follow-on sessions. The key here is really Nile has security built in. I think I've said that enough number of times, but we are a default deny posture fabric, as well as peer-to-peer traffic is inherently blocked within Nile. So everything I was talking about, all those different layers that you have today, when you think about zero trust and when you think about security, you of course have the AP switches, controllers, gateways, then you have the NAC appliances. For admin access, you're controlling it through TACACS. You have your internal firewall, then your edge firewall. But now with Nile also having the edge service and the trust service in place, plus the fabric itself built for secure access, all of that collapses into just these two layers on the right side that you see. What does that mean? It means 50% lower costs, and it's a 70% reduction in complexity. Needless to say, how that happens, you can see a lot of these layers collapsing. For example, TACACS. Well, there is no need for anyone logging into the switches and APs individually. So the TACACS access really is not required in the Nile model. All the management of the fabric is Nile responsibility. All the visibility and control you need to configure your network, set up SSIDs and your policies and your wired access, it's in the Nile portal for the customers and partners to configure. We'll look at some more examples. When you think about the journey with Nile from day 0 to day 2, so we talked about autonomous operations and we talked about security. This is a zoomed in view of everything that you will experience with Nile along the way. But as you're going through this, also think about how you're dealing with this today with the legacy vendors, right? So when it comes to day 0, you're most likely spending a lot of time in the planning and design phase. What that means is there is a site discovery phase, there is a site survey phase that is still required with Nile. But once that data is provided to Nile, there's a lot of automation that kicks in, and we are able to save a lot of time and resources when it comes to generating the bill of materials, generating the connectivity plan for where the network is going to get deployed. Nile Nav is the app that serves two purposes. One, the data intake. That's your site discovery. The site survey, of course, for RF site survey for Wi-Fi, it's absolutely required. You have to use the standard tools out there in the market like Hamina, Ekahau, Sidos. Those files also get uploaded into Nile, and we automatically consume those files to come up with the number of APs that you've deployed, what's the transmit power that we've used on those access points, and so on and so forth, right? So you can see just between your day -1 to day 0 journey, Nile is already enabling a lot of that automation in order to move faster and get to day 1 deployment much quicker. Now on day 1, that's where the deployment happens. The Nile Nav app plays a big role. That's where you scan the QR codes. The app shows you almost like navigating on Google Maps. It'll turn by turn tell you, now the distribution layer is up. Now connect the access layer. Now connect the APs. This is where the connections need to be made. These are the 2 wires you connect. These are how you connect. This is how you connect the 2 distribution switches to each other, and so on and so forth. Why is that possible? The Nile digital twin. This again ties back to the standardized layer 3 architecture that we have created, the clean sheet approach. That's what enables us to create exactly what your network is going to look like on day 1. So let's say, for example, your network needs a ring of 6 access switches, 2 distribution switches, and about 34 APs. The way all of this is going to interconnect and form the Nile Zero Trust fabric, it's already pre-decided because there is one way in which it all interconnects. So the digital twin is already active. Now, when the installer goes on site and starts to provision these devices, actually, in case of Nile, there is really no configuration when it comes to the distribution layer. It's just very, very minimal config for your point-to-point links. But without going into too much detail, once you start to deploy your network, your as deployed network is getting validated with the digital twin. So for example, if you have not made the interconnect between your distribution switches for redundancy, the Nile Nav app is immediately going to flag that, hey, the digital twin expects that you need to have the interconnect between the distribution layer. You've missed that. So the installer is not allowed to close the job until that issue gets fixed. For example, there are 34 APs, 17 APs need to go to switch 1 and 2. The other 17 need to go to switch 3 and 4. But for whatever reason, 20 APs were connected to switch 1 and 2, and the remaining 17 went to switch 3 and 4. Now you just breached your salt and pepper deployment because you want to have true redundancy. You want to make sure that your APs are split evenly between these switches. So if you have made that mistake, if you have deviated from that digital twin prescribed design, it's getting flagged on day 1 right away. And on day 2, this is where your optimize, operate, and lifecycle is happening. What does that mean? We have spent a lot of time to make sure that the best practices for networks are already embedded inside our default posture. So for example, and Wi-Fi has better examples. For example, channel planning, it runs automatically. The transmit power, the type of survey that was conducted, it's taken from the survey files. But the ongoing optimization of channel allocation is done nightly once automatically. If certain data rates need to be removed and can be removed on Wi-Fi, they're automatically removed. If you have excessive 2.4 coverage, we go ahead and disable those excessive 2.4 radios. Those are just some examples of how we are automatically optimizing it, right? That's one. When you talk about operations, this is where we have a massive alerting engine. This is where we have our true AI shining. From everything to environmental issues such as, let's say, a wire got chewed out or crimping is wrong, speed mismatch on links between fabric elements, or it could be something as serious as there is a failover that has occurred, or there is like some unexpected software bug that may have happened. All of that is Nile responsibility, and the fabric is being monitored 24/7 with X-ray visibility. And we are trying to catch problems even before the customers are able to notice it. excuse me. And we are generating those tickets not only in the AIOps command center, but we are also sending those alerts to the customer. So we keep them informed, and we also show them details such as what are the remedies that we may have tried, and why is it that we are reaching out to you as the customer or partner, so now you can mobilize some feet on the ground. Things such as high temperature on a switch because the air conditioner in your IDF stopped working. Now, that's something that Nile cannot control. That is where we send you the alert. And of course, there is no AI required there. It's just simply monitoring the telemetry that we're getting from switches. But for something more involved, where let's say a link went down or a link is degraded because we have seen recurring CRC errors on a link, that's where we would have conducted some diagnostics already. We provide you that visibility. When we are not able to solve the problem any further, that's when you mobilize some feet on the ground. And lastly, the life cycle. So the hardware, a lot of the tech refresh is based on the contract and it's included in it. The software life cycle is Nile responsibility, meaning you're not having to deal with version compatibility. The entire fabric gets upgraded in an orchestrated fashion. And we are extremely diligent about how software upgrades are performed. We hold the patent for performing a pre and post verification of each software upgrade that we do. It's completely orchestrated from the cloud. We take a snapshot of the system, what it looks like before upgrade. Then we do an extremely thorough check as far as the system vitals are concerned. And then we take a snapshot post upgrade. And not only are we looking for system metrics, but we're also looking for outside in connectivity, meaning everything may look okay after the upgrade, but what if the end devices are still not able to come back? So we have some intelligence and some patented technology there where we make sure that devices are connecting back. And that's how we make sure you realize 3x faster change management. That's how you realize 90% ticket reduction, because we have gotten rid of error prone protocols like VLANs, and that in turn will help you get rid of your STP and your loops and so on and so forth. And that's how you're able to realize a 30 to 50% cost reduction, right? And how each of these portals work with you, just to have a visual in front of your eyes. We talked about the Nile Nav app. So on the left side that you see the day 0 to day -1, the app is your friend. You basically use that for site discovery purposes and also installation purposes. Day 1, of course, the Nile Nav app will play a role. But what you see here in the visual is like the digital twin. The topology view that you see there is the Nile digital twin of the network. And on an ongoing basis, in the snapshot 3, what you see is a fully automated ticket that was generated by the AIOps command center, which basically is automatically detecting any kind of core-related incidents happening. It's also analyzing them automatically, providing the RCA, and also putting a remedy in place, which is where our closed loop comes into the picture. So if I were to take an example, within the fabric, it's completely redundant. You have redundant links going between the DS and the ASs. If you have a bad link because of CRCs, then we are able to redirect traffic through a better link. All of this happens completely automatically end to end. The AIOps command center detects the condition, it applies the traffic redirection remedy, and it informs the internal team as well as informs the customer. And if the problem keeps repeating, that's where we let the customer know, hey, Mr. Customer, I think it's time for you to take a look at that link physically, because this flip-flopping keeps happening. Maybe it's a bad cable. If it's an SFP, maybe we need to clean the SFP, and so on and so forth, right? With that, some more zoom into the TCO itself. I hope the day 0 to day end journey that we sort of zoomed into, now it makes sense when you look at what would it take to achieve the same outcome with the legacy system, where you're procuring the network hardware and software, then you have the security appliance and software, Then you have the IT procurement cost, the capital allocation, license, vendor management, your support contract, and so on and so forth is part of that. Then you have the entire task of going through the planning and design, whether you need a tier 2 design or a tier 3 design, and so on and so forth, right? Then you have the testing, deployment. You are essentially now piecing it all together along with the operations. And I already talked about software upgrade alone can be a very costly affair. Just trying to maintain compatibility between the Wi-Fi piece with the wired piece, the controller and the switches, and the interoperability with your NAC solution alone could be a nightmare. So now, if you think about all of those get collapsed with Nile, will help you realize that 30 to 50% cost saving. Why? Because first of all, the simplified architecture that comes with security built in, you're getting some of that zero trust security with the fabric, with the add-on trust service and microsegmentation, and the radius service in the Nile cloud. You're getting all of the pieces that you traditionally need for a NAC solution, all collapsed within Nile. Then you have the Nile cloud services. Again, this is where we're not talking about support contracts or add-on services like help me with release notes and the best version to use and which version has the least amount of bugs and what version of software will work for me and so on and so forth, right? So all of that gets completely collapsed. And then the Nile autonomous operations, we looked at a couple of examples, but we can talk about more. But that's where you have the issue detection, triage, and closed loop automation, along with the automated software upgrades that Nile takes care of, right? Hopefully this gives a good visual of what we mean by gaining efficiency in operations, but also gaining a secure network by design, right? Next, again, this is just to make sure that you all walk away with some appreciation for what Nile has done in order to really make that NAC solution collapse into one single solution like Nile. On the left, as you can see, you have all these different layers. And on the right side with Nile, one single pane of glass where you are managing your wired, wireless to begin with. You're also managing your microsegmentation policies within the same pane of glass. Plus, you have the inbuilt zero trust because of no peer-to-peer. You've already opted for a secure network because it's a non-VLAN based network. It's a layer 3 design network. And the radius service running within the Nile cloud, if you opt for that, then you're getting the radius piece that will help you tie that radius with, let's say, MS Intune, check for compliance. We have all the support for basically different fields in MS Intune. We can take that compliance check into the Nile radius and then decide on policies for devices that are getting onto the Nile network, right? So as you can see here, just for NAC appliances alone, that could be running into $1 million a year. Right? And then finally, the 5 zeros that we would like you to walk away with today. Zero trust, because you're getting a network that is truly built for zero trust. We looked at the 3 layers. Zero trust is not just about having it in one layer or the other. You need it across the layers, meaning your infra, your access, as well as policy. Zero tickets. This is where a lot of the complexity that we have reduced in the network fabric itself. This will certainly make the CIOs happy because no VLANs, no loops. Right there, you've probably eliminated several of your tickets. NetSec, increased productivity, zero touch. This is where how you deploy, how you do the bill of materials. If you have an expansion, if you have an acquisition, you're not having to think about, okay, now I just acquired another company. I need to build a network out for that acquisition. You're not having to worry about building a new stack for that office. It's a cookie cutter Lego block L3 fabric that you design and you ship it out, right? CFOs can be happy going into with Nile with zero capex, predictable costs. Who doesn't like predictable costs? It's all subscription model based, and then zero risk. CEOs like it. Why? Because we talked about sensors, we talked about some technicalities involved, but with a reliable architecture that's foundationally that has been reimagined, clubbed with the outside in testing of our own network through various sensors that we deploy, the simplicity that we have brought into the software, it just makes for a very reliable system. Plus, we are able to offer guarantees backed SLA based networks, right? So for a final roundup, if I were to have you folks walk away with truly what makes Nile differentiated is the fact that when Nile started, we did not start off to build yet another networking company, like I said in the beginning, right? The entire architecture had to be reimagined. That's what we did, which meant it had to be something that reduces that protocol the stack of protocols that get used needed to be reduced and collapsed into something that's easy to imagine, easy to work with, not having to deal with loops and VLANs, right? And that's where the legacy network vendors are still having to catch up. It is structurally a clean state and it cannot be retrofitted. That's the value that Nile is bringing. And the proof is in the pudding. I was referring to some events that Nile has participated in, and here are a few that I would like to name. There is a capture the flag event that we participated in, where we connected a Windows machine to our fabric, and we told these world-class hackers that there is a file on this machine. You can plug your laptop on any of the other ports available and just go at it. If you are able to access the file on that Windows laptop, there was a big bounty. And there were over 1 million attempts made, and they were not able to get to the laptop. Again, this is thanks to you cannot access the network unless you're authenticated. So you're not even getting anywhere unless someone authorizes you to be on the network, right? We talked about air snitch. For Nile, the advisory against air snitch was very simple and straightforward. We basically said, look, you don't have any L2 adjacency with Nile network. So Nile customers were just inherently protected, right? Very few times in the life of a networking company can you have an advisory that looks so simplified. With that, we are, I believe, a few minutes over. I did have a bit of a Nile portal preview planned, but I would like to check with our panelists, Nidhi and others, if there is interest, and if I'm allowed, maybe I could go into the Nile portal just for a brief minute.
Yes, sure, please. If we can wrap in the next 5 to 6 minutes, that should suffice.
All right, perfect. Okay. So I'm going to switch screens real quick, and we will have time to just go to the customer facing portal. And I wanted to leave you all with a visual of what you basically see when you log into the Nile, right? So as a customer, this is the Nile portal. This is what you are presented with when you log in. And from left to right, the way this entire dashboard has been teed up is the first tile right off the bat tells you what are my top 3 issues. What do you care about in a network? You care about whether my service is available, do I have the capacity, and do I have the coverage? Right off the bat, this tile is telling me that, there seems to be some issue with coverage at one of the locations, right? But my availability and capacity look good. Infrastructure is the customer's infrastructure. So Nile is actually actively testing for the customer's internet connection, DNS, DHCP, and radius. This is not a simple ICMP ping we are performing to these services, but these network services are actually being tested with real proofs, right? So if I were to take the example of DHCP, we're actually performing a DHCP transaction with the customer's DHCP. If this was a Nile hosted cloud DHCP service, the transaction would be happening with our cloud DHCP service. Same with the radius. If the customer has opted for Nile's cloud-based radius, we would be, even if it is Nile Cloud, we would still be making sure that the Nile's cloud radius service is available, right? So right off the bat, if you are seeing a lot of errors and issues with radius or DHCP, you know that something is off. If your DHCP is not okay and your users are complaining, it will take you less than a minute to conclude that my DHCP errors under network services in my infrastructure are very high. Something doesn't look good. I need to go check. The third tile is devices. This is where we are tracking our DHCP errors on my end devices racking up. So if this tile here showed me that there are like 500 DHCP errors, I know that there is something not okay with the network. And most likely, if the DHCP errors are of that high account, maybe the DHCP service is an issue. Or if it's a centralized DHCP service, maybe something changed on the firewall. Is that why maybe these requests are failing? And you could check similar ones for others as well. And the last tile is applications. This application is application availability, just to be clear. And this is customizable. If customers would like to have their own specific business applications being monitored for availability, those can be customized, and Nile would basically keep actively probing those and recording whether the application is available and what is the latency on a simple HTTPS ping is what we are basically using for these. And you, of course, have visibility into your entire network in terms of all the connected devices, wired versus wireless, several filtering options available. You can choose a certain view and choose to even export this view if you needed a quick report of what's on your network. And finally, I just wanted to give a quick preview of alerts. All of the AIOps command center that I talked about and how it works in tandem with the Nile portal, whether it's linked down or the Nile service block entirely going offline, or 2 access points going offline, or a switch going offline, or let's say a certain percentage of end devices are suddenly experiencing DHCP errors or authentication errors. All of that kind of intelligent alerting, synthesized alerting, that also is going to be actionable. In some cases, it's informational, but in a lot of cases, actionable for end customers. It will all appear in here. And all said and done, of course, customers may not be sitting and staring at this dashboard. So we have a plethora of integrations that you can explore. Today, we have 2 main categories of integrations, really the ITSM integrations with a generic webhook. And this webhook can go to your ServiceNow, Slack, and several others. It's a standard webhook that we support. And as far as SIEM integration is concerned, we have support for all of these that you can see here: Logic Monitor, Splunk, Snowflake. Although this is a data warehouse, we have seen customers double it down as a SIEM. We have support for CrowdStrike SIEM. Specifically, this is the CrowdStrike SIEM, Sumo Logic. And we've also had customers where they say, hey, I'm running like a generic application that can just take in a bunch of data. So we have a generic HTTP connector that we have built so that, let's say Datadog comes along, and if it can just work with the generic HTTP connector, we have support for that. So with that, I would like to thank you all for intently listening and participating in the polls. And I see that there were some questions. If we weren't able to answer all of them, we would certainly be happy to get back to you. But from Nile and me, Dipen, that's it from me. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dipen. I'll just give it a minute to see if there are any questions. I think you covered most of the questions, Dipen, while you were speaking, especially about the AI aspect of it. So if there are any questions that come in post that, we'll reach out to you and we will set up calls with, follow-up calls. Thank you once again, everybody. Thank you, Dipen. Thank you, Yahya. And thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.